Hello guys, welcome back. In this video, let us learn about one more interesting service with a end-to-end project. Let's say I have some data in DynamoDB where that data I am getting by using this Lambda function, or I'm putting some data into DynamoDB by using the Lambda function. Let's say I have users where these users will actually put some data into DynamoDB, and these users need to get some data from DynamoDB. Now, to do that, is there any service in between available for me where if I put some data in it, where that will trigger this Lambda function, where based on my request, this Lambda function will process that, and either it may put the data or get the data based on the request. So like that, for triggering this, do I have any gateway service present in between? Yes, the answer is yes. There is a service present in AWS, that is Amazon API Gateway, where by using that, you can able to trigger Lambda functions, and you can able to put some data from your website to your Lambda function, or you can get some data from other, not only Lambda, from other services to your website as well by using this API gateway. So here what you do, you just manage requests as well as responses. Here, by using this service, API gateway service, you can able to manage the requests as well as the responses among services, that is between services, as well as from users end as well. So for that, we actually use this API gateway. Now, in order to understood this API gateway service better, so let's do a hands-on with this API gateway. So now we're gonna deploy a RESTful API gateway. We will create, or we will develop a RESTful API gateway for proxy Lambda integration. Let's say I have some data in Lambda. Now I want to get that data by using this API gateway. So for that, we're gonna use now this API gateway. Now in this lab, we're gonna create this API gateway, and we also put some data in this Lambda. In real time, you may get the data to this Lambda function from DynamoDB or other data stores. So currently for this demo, I'm putting some data in this Lambda itself, and I'm getting that data by using this API gateway from a URL. I'll show you that as well. So this we're gonna implement end to end. That is, we'll create a API gateway, and we also create this Lambda function from our own in this lab. So let's start it. Now for this lab purpose, what are the resources do I need to create? I need to create a Lambda function as well as a API gateway. So for this, I've already logged into my AWS management console. You can see now I'm searching for Lambda, where in this Lambda, I'll put some data, and I'll get the data by using that API gateway URL. Now you can see here we have an option, that is create a function. Now I'm just clicking that. Now I'm expecting to create this Lambda function from scratch. So I'm providing the Lambda function name. So I'm just providing function 1. You can provide the name based on your experiment or project, so that it can be easily recognizable to you. Now currently I'm running my code that I gonna put in this Lambda function on top of Python 3.10. So that's why I provided this. Now to create this, you need to the IAM user. By using what IAM user you log in, by using that IAM user, if you want to create this Lambda function, then you need to have permissions. So otherwise, if you don't have any permissions to create it, then create a role where that role need to have the permissions to create this Lambda function and use that role. By using this, by clicking on use role and selecting that role, you can use that role to create this Lambda function. So that's it. I'm just moving on with the create. So before that, I want to show you the advanced settings as well. Currently, I'm not creating any URL. Now I'm just clicking on create function. You can see my function is just now created, right? Yes. So successfully created the function1. You can see even I do not get the function URL because that's I haven't enabled. So that's why it was not created. But we're going to access this Lambda function by using API gateway. So we're going to manage that accessing by using API gateway. Now let's write some code here. Now I'm putting some code. I'll explain, don't worry what this code is. So this logger is just to logging the data. So till what step my data is there. So that's what doing with this logger. Now let's move on to the major code. Now I'm assuming vehicles is my data. So in this vehicles, I stored 3 vehicles IDs as well as that vehicles type and those vehicles availability. So based on user request, I need to provide these details to my users. So let's say if my user is not provided any vehicle ID, then I need to show all the vehicle details. So for that, I have configured this. You can see the response body I have written like this. My response body contains only vehicles that will provide me all these vehicle details. When if a resource is only / vehicles, that means if I am getting the request, if I am getting the request in the requested URL with ending requested URL ending with this / vehicles, then I am providing all the vehicles details. So let's say if my user is provided certain vehicle ID, then I just need to provide that vehicle details only. So that I implemented in elif part. So here you can see if my resource ends with this, that is a vehicles and followed by some ID. So in that case, I'm using that ID and I'm finding the item, that is I'm finding the type of item it is, and I'm storing it in the value, and I'm just providing that value only. That is whenever ID is equals to the vehicle ID. Whenever ID is equals to vehicle ID, that value only I'm providing as a response to response body, otherwise I am providing as error, right? Yeah. So at last I've created this response payload function where for this I'm providing ERR details where ERR is initially none. Let's say if I haven't found any ID that user is provided, then this error will be noted, that is vehicle not found error will be stored in ERR variable and that will be passed. Where in the response body it passes the response. So if the extension is not there, that is ID is not provided, then whole vehicles is provided and in error place it will provide you none. Whereas if I provide any ID during requested URL, then it will provide the error. So based on these two, that is if value is not found, then it will generate a value not found error, and that response will be provided to this function. So don't worry, I'll show you this function as well. And if the vehicle ID is found, then error value is none only, but response will be provided. Response body is created, and that response body is returned. So if vehicle is not found, it will take the response body like this empty. Now at last I'll show you this, where here I returned a JSON script. You can see, yes. So why do I provided like this JSON script? Because this is the requirement. You need to provide the response in this format only to your API gateway. So if you do not follow this format, you may get some errors. So please watch this format once again. So here I'm providing headers. So in these headers, I'm providing the content type as application JSON. So that header you need to provide, and body I'm providing. If error is there, then that error I'm providing. Otherwise, I'm providing JSON format of my result, whatever I got. So that result is this. That is nothing but here in place of result, what we are passing? Response body. So that response body got stored here, and that response will be returned if there is no error. And then based on error, if error is there, then 400 code will be sent. So if there is no error, this else value, that is a 200 value, is sent as a status code. So this whole JSON format data will be returned back. Now I'm expecting to save this whole code. So basically we have did a simple thing, that is we created some vehicles data, and based on user requests, user URL requests, if he entered only vehicles, then we are providing the vehicles details, or else if he provided the URL with vehicles and their ID, vehicle ID, if the vehicle is found, then we are providing that vehicle related details. If the vehicle is not found, we are specifying that vehicle is not found. That's it. Simply. Now I'm just deploying this Lambda code. That is nothing but we are saving this Lambda code. You can see successfully updated the function. Now I'm expecting to test this. So whenever you test it for the first time, it asks you to create a new event. So since this is a vehicles related event, now I'm providing vehicles like that. Now I'm just moving on with the template. So for API gateway AWS proxy, I already have some template available. I want to use that. And what I'm expecting, I want to provide the resource as vehicles. Since if I provide vehicles, what do I get the response? All the vehicles details, right? Yes. So let's check that. Do we get all the vehicles details or not? Now I'm providing vehicles as a details, and I'm storing it by using what name? By using a vehicles. Now I'm just saving it. Now I'm just, you can see by this arrow, this vehicles test case is test event is selected. Now I'm just clicking on test. You can see all the in our response, what do we got? We got the JSON response. That is what we created at the end. So this is the response that is returned. So what is the status code we got? That is 200. That is we not get any error. And what is the body got? We got all the vehicles details. That is vehicle 1, vehicle 2, as well as the vehicle 3 as well there. Yeah. So this is the vehicle 3. So like that, all the vehicles details we got, and this header is also written, right? Yes. So whenever we request these vehicles, then we got this response. Now I want to show you requesting for particular ID as well. So for that, I'm configuring another event, and I want to provide, I'm just creating one more event, that is configure test event. So here I want to provide one more detail. I want to get vehicle by ID. So based on ID, I want to get the vehicle. So for that, I'm using the previous code, and here I'm providing the request with ID, right? Yes. So at last, here one more important point, under path parameters, you also need to provide ID value. So if you do not provide this for testing, then it won't get, it will even provide you the error response. So now I'm just clicking on save. So for this event, I provided the name, what I provided, vehicle by ID. Now I'm just selected this. So how do you know this is selected other than this? So since the pointer is here, so I think this is selected. Now I'm just clicking on test. So since I provided one as the ID, so for this one, what is the type of vehicle? That is bike, that is availability is also true, right? Yeah. So I got the content related to that vehicle ID, right? Yes. So till now, what we have did? So we have just created a Lambda function, and we provided some vehicle details, and we're getting those vehicle details based on events. Based on events. Based on events, we are just getting that details, right? Yes. So what's our actual aim? I want to deploy, or I want to develop, or I want to create a RESTful API. So if a user requests, by using that RESTful API URL, then this Lambda function need to provide the response, right? Yes. So now we have did this. We have created our Lambda function. We implemented our code there. Now I want to create this API gateway, and by using user requests, I want to validate, do I am getting all the vehicles, and I want to validate, do I am getting a vehicle detail based on vehicle ID or not. So for this, let's move back to our AWS management console, and let's move to that API gateway service. Now I'm searching for API gateway. Yeah. Now I'm just opening this service. So by using this, what we can able to do, we can able to build and deploy our own APIs. Now, yeah, here we actually create our own API. So in that we create some requests. Since we are requesting a Lambda function to get some data, right? Yes. So we create that request. Then after we test that API gateway. Then after we deploy it, and then after we use it to test for real time. That is by using any web browser, we will test it. Now you can see I have this RESTful API. Now I'm just clicking on build. Now I'm just clicking on build for this RESTful API. Now you can see we are under this page. Now I'm just providing the API name. Since it's a API 1, now I just provided the name like this. You can able to provide your required name. So what is the name that fits for you, that you can able to provide. Since I am creating this for regional endpoints, I am providing this. If you are creating for other, then you choose based on your appropriate endpoint. Now I'm just clicking on create API. So that's it. We just provided the name, and we provided the type. We provided the type, right? Yes. So now we successfully created our API. So in this, we need to create a resource. So by using that resource only, we can able to create methods, and we can able to create the request as well. Now I'm just creating a resource. So what is our resource name? Our resource is nothing but vehicle, right? So I'm just providing the resource name as vehicles, right? Yes. So now I'm just clicking on create resource. So whenever a user requests like this, that is /vehicles to my URL, then what he need to get? He need to get the response from my Where? From my Lambda function. So now let's create. Now I've selected these vehicles. That is whatever the resource that I've created. So for this, I'm creating a method. So in the right side, you have an option to create method for this vehicles resource that you just created. Since I created this resource for getting the data from my Lambda function, I'm selecting the method as get. I also selected, so to what service you want to integrate this API. I'm getting the data from Lambda function, so that's why I'm integrating with Lambda. Since it sends the request to Lambda function as a structured event, I'm selecting this Lambda Proxy integration. I'm enabling this Lambda Proxy integration. Now here we need to select the Lambda function. To which Lambda function we need to send the request. So whenever the particular URL is triggered, then to which Lambda function I need to send the request. Since I created my Lambda function by using function one name, I selected that Lambda function. Now I'm moving on with the default options and I'm just clicking on create method. So I just clicked on create method. Now it is creating. You can see, now you can see our get request got created successfully inside our resource, that is vehicles, right? Yes. So let's test this. So in order to test this, you have an option, that is a test option is there. So I'm just clicking on test, and here I'm not passing any parameters. Now I'm just clicking on test. You can see we got the response. So we got all the vehicles responses, that is a vehicle ID 1 response we got, vehicle ID 2 response we got the vehicle ID 3 response as well. So here I want to discuss one more point. So majorly, whenever you are creating your API gateway, you may get the error. So here you may get the internal server error. So most of the cases it may happens with the students who are creating for the first time. So I will show you when do you get that error as well and how do you rectify that error as well. So for that, so when do you get that error? So you get that error actually when your Lambda function or backend application is not working well. Now I'm opening my Lambda function that I have previously created, and in this Lambda function, I want to create some error. I am just creating some error, that is I want to change the indentation. In Lambda, that indentation matters a lot. If we change the indentation also, it may provide you some error. So here you can see in this line 17, I am removing the space, that is indentation we call. Now I am deploying this code, that is whatever the change I have done, that change I have deployed. Now you can see that space is removed. Actually this vehicles must be inside this function. If you put like this, then this vehicles is outside this function. So you may get some errors as well sometimes. So now let's test this before running that. Yeah, you got some error, right? Yes. So in the backend Lambda function, you got some error. That is here you got some error in this Lambda function. So during this Lambda function error, so let's try with this API gateway, whether we got the response or not. So I am testing this API gateway with the same thing. So previously how we tested, like that only I'm testing. Now I'm just clicking on test. Now you can see the message. What is that? Internal server error. If you see this error, so don't panic that your API gateway is not working. The answer for this, the reason for this internal server error is that whatever the internal server that this API gateway is connected to, that server is actually error. So you need to check with the backend application, not with this API gateway. This API gateway is working fine. You need to rectify the error in the backend application. Now I'm opening my Lambda function. I'm just making this function correct. That is, I'm just again providing the indentation, that is nothing but space. We say that in Python, we say that indentation space in Python as indentation. Now I provided that indentation, or you can say space, and I just deployed, or you can say saved that code. Now I'm just moving back to my, again, same API gateway. Now I'm just testing it again. You can previously check, previously this error was there. Now I'm just clicking on test again. Now you can see you got the data again. So whenever you got that internal server error date as message response body, then you need to check with the backend server and rectify that error as well, right? Yeah. So I hope you got that knowledge as well. Now I have shown you how to get the all vehicles data, right? Yes. So now I also want to get a particular vehicle data based on ID. For that also I want to create. So since we are creating that ID inside this vehicles resource, now I am just selected this vehicles resource. Since I am creating one more resource, that is what /ID within flower braces. Now I'm just clicking on create resource. You can see the path. The path is already there, or else you can select. Now inside vehicles, what I'm creating? I am creating this ID, right? Yes. So I am creating this ID. So that's why I provided this ID. And now I'm just clicking on create resource. You can see our ID got created here, where actually it is present. It is actually present inside our vehicles. Now for this ID also, I need to get the response, right? Yes. So for that response, to get the response, I am clicking on create method. So where I am creating this method? Inside this vehicle, inside this ID, I am creating this method. Now, so what I need to get the response? I need to get the response. So that's why I'm selecting the method type as get. And from where I need to get the response? From Lambda function. So that's why I selected the Lambda function. And since it needs to send the request in a structured event format to the Lambda function, I selected that. And I selected the function from where I need to get the response. Simply, I'm just clicking on create this method. So before that, I'm just using get request. And since I'm requesting Lambda function, and I selected that, and I enabled this Lambda proxy, and I provided the Lambda function. Now I'm just clicking on create method. Now within few seconds, your ID also got created. Now inside this vehicles, inside this ID, whenever you run this or you test this ID by providing certain ID, then you got the response. You need to get the response. Now I want to test this. So by providing some ID value as 1, I'm just expecting to test this. You can see that particular ID related details you got, right? Yes. So that particular ID related details I got. In this way, you need to create your resources based on the path you want to trigger your Lambda function. And you need to create the get method in order to get the data from your Lambda function. In similar to this, if you want to put some data by using the Lambda function, by using the request, then there is also some method, that is the put method is also there, post method is also there. So like that, based on your need, you can use any one of the method. Now I'm just you can see I have created my vehicles as well as my ID. Now that is my vehicles API I have created, as well as my IDs API I have created. So since I have created all, now I am just clicking on deploy. If you click on deploy, then your API gateway will get deployed. So for that, we need to select a stage. If you have available stages, you can save that to deploy it. Now I'm just clicking on create a new stage. So it will asking me stage name. Now I'm providing the stage name as stage 1. And here you need to provide some description. So for Lambda integration, So you wish you can provide any one of the stage name or deployment description. Now I'm just clicking on deploy. You can see it was a, yeah. So it was now deployed successfully. Our stage got deployed successfully, as well as in our stage, our API got deployed successfully in this stage. If you expand this, you will get that particular API that you created, right? Yes. Now I'm copying this invoking URL. I just copied this invoke URL. Now I am opening a new website tab, and here I simply pasting that, and I am simply clicking on enter. Now you can see I'm getting missing authentication token. So whatever the invoking URL do I have, that I have provided, but I haven't provided vehicles. So I'm providing vehicles as the extension now. So if I provide this vehicles as the extension, what I need to get? I need to get all the data related to my vehicles. I have 3 vehicles. I need to get all those 3 vehicles data. This API gateway or this URL will trigger my API gateway. Then by using that API gateway, it need to trigger backend Lambda function. From that Lambda function, actually, I need to get the data to API gateway. From API gateway, I need to get the response to here. Now I'm just clicking on enter. You can see I got the data, right? Yes. So I got 3 vehicles data. So that means our API gateway, whatever the RESTful API gateway that we deployed, that is working fine. Now I want the data related to ID2. I want only this data. This ID2 related vehicle data I want. So that's why I'm providing /ID. ID is what? 2. So now I'm providing and clicking on enter. You can see that particular ID related data do you got? Yes, we got that data as well. Now let's provide a invalid ID. So do I get an error or not, that I want to check. Actually I want to see the IDs. I have ID1, ID2, ID3 vehicles. Now I want to provide ID as 4 and I want to check whether I am getting error or not. You can see vehicle not found. So we got error. So vehicle not found, we got this message we got. So we have done this. We deployed successfully an API gateway and we integrated this API gateway. We integrated this API gateway with what? With Lambda function. You can see under resources, you actually see whatever you deployed. This vehicles resource I have created. So under this I have created a get method. So here you can see this will get the data from your Lambda function. So whenever this was requested, then you will get the data from your Lambda function. So whenever after that, so with that vehicle also, if you request this ID, then it will get the data from again Lambda function only, right? Yes. So in this way, you can able to create your resources and you can use them. So after creating your resources, you need to deploy that resource in particular stage. So after deployment, you get the URL of your stage, or else if you want the URL related to that particular domain, you can even select that particular domain or a particular resource. And if you click on it inside the stages, you will get the exact URL for that particular resource stage. You can see under this stage for that particular resource, you will get that URL. Or else, let's say I want the URL for this. Now I'm just clicking on this. So you can see for that as well, we got the URL. So here you can see under stages, you have the URLs related data. So after deployment, you will get the stages. So inside that, you will have the URLs to invoke your API gateway. So under resources, you actually have what are the resources that you provided, right? Yes. So that related data available under resources. Under stages, you will have the URLs. So By using what URL you can able to trigger, or you can able to get that particular vehicle's data or vehicle ID data. So that will be available under these stages. These stages will be available after you deployed your stages. You can do the deployment from resources itself. You can see that deploy API option is available here. By using that, you can able to deploy with available APIs, or else you can even able to deploy with the new stages as well. By using available stages or new stages, you can able to deploy your gateway. So that's it about this. We have created a RESTful API successfully, and we also get the data from our Lambda function successfully, that is a vehicle's data, and based on vehicle ID also we got the data. So I hope this video is useful to you and you understood how to use the API gateway, how to create your resources and how to deploy your resources, and how to get the stages invoking a URL. And you have also seen how to invoke directly from web browser and get the data from integrated backend integrated web servers like Lambda function. And you have also seen how to rectify the error, that is the internal server error, whenever you encountered while creating an API gateway also. So I hope this video is useful to you and you got some knowledge regarding a hands-on implementation of a RESTful API gateway deployment. So I hope this video is contentful. If you feel this video is contentful, then please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon to get the latest updates. Thanks for watching again. See you back in the next video. Until then, bye bye guys.